The Coastal Carolina Chanticleers spoiled Temple's home opener.
Now the Owls will walk back into the link against a team they've never played before from the Beehive State, which is Utah, by the way.
I didn't know that.
I'm Jackson Bachelor, live outside of Edberg Olson Hall. Later in the show, I'll take a look at how the new man behind center did in his debut on Saturday.
And I'm Kayla Levine, live at the studio set. A lot happened around the AAC over the weekend in non-conference play. Later in the show, I'll discuss those wins and losses as the entire AAC heads towards conference play. Inside the Nest is live, and it starts right now.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Inside the Nest. He's Hayden Bandel and I'm Sam Covone. It has been quite the week for Temple football.
A new look at the quarterback position yet again for the Cherry and White as Evan Simon started over Forrest Brock, who suffered a wrist contusion prior to the week against Navy. The first ever matchup between Coastal Carolina and the Owls also marked the home opener for the 2024 season, in which there are more than 13,000 fans in attendance. With a new season comes a new quarterback, Evan Simon making his debut under center. Temple ready to play in front of its home crowd for the first time this season. Evan Simon, in his second drive of the year, gets the ball batted up, and it's Zamarian Gordon who picks it out of the air and into the end zone. Temple has given up points in every game this season without the defense being on the field. Very next snap, it's Antoine Littleton with the longest run of the season thus far for the Owls for 37 yards. It sets up a field goal attempt for Maddox Trulio, who missed from 54 yards earlier. This one from the same distance goes off of the upright and in. After a costly E.J. Wilson fumble that gave the Chanticleers the football at the 11, it's Cameron Wright who reels in his first career touchdown catch. The next drive for Temple, some more positives as Dante Wright makes the catch on the near side. The grad student continues to be a problem for opposing defenders. Later in the drive, Simon, with plenty of time, rolls out to his right, and he's going to hit John Adams for his first touchdown of the season, and it gets Temple's comeback effort started.
Temple trailing 21-10 heading into the third quarter. Simon is going to pass short to Dante Wright, who runs all the way from the 50-yard line to Coastal Carolina's 29-yard line. A couple of plays later, Temple now on the goal line. Simon passes to who? Dante Wright, of course, to make the score 21-17. Vasco now with the ball. He fakes out Trey Thomas. He keeps the ball and runs 18 yards. The Chanticleers score in the next play to extend their lead 28-17. Antonio Jones, with his second reception of the day, gets chased around and knocked out of bounds by Zamarian Gordon. With 13 minutes left in the fourth, Maddox Trulio kicks his third and final field goal for 37 yards. Temple trails 28-20. Ethan Vasco with nowhere to go as DJ Woodbury applies pressure, gets to the QB to record the first sack for Coastal Carolina's team this season, though it wasn't enough to stop the Chanticleers. Temple falls in its home opener 28-20.
QB Ethan Vasco completed over 70% of his passes, throwing a shade over 100 yards and running for 92. Receiver Jamison Tucker led the Chanticleers with 35 receiving yards and hauled in a career-high 4 receptions. For Temple, it was Rutgers transfer Evan Simon in the Cherry and White for the first time, who threw for 185 yards with 2 touchdowns and an interception. For Dante Wright, it doesn't matter who's throwing him the football as he continues to amaze. He's now caught 20 throws over the last 2 games, the most in a 2-game stretch for him. Defensively, DJ Woodbury Sr. continues to be a bright light with a career-high 15 tackles. The senior also had his first career sack. Coach Drayton talked about some of the positives and negatives after the loss.
We were on schedule for the first time, during the course of the season. And, this is our identity. We want to be a run-first football team, and we got the backs that can do it. The penalties are a result of a lack of focus. It is. When you're sitting there talking about illegal formations, we're not focused. If you're talking about, jumping off sides like we did at the end of the game, right? It's just a lack of focus. And You know, we just got to get this team to focus for 60 minutes of football.
Just like any other week. You know, you never know. You're always one snap away. And Coach gave me the chance this week. Yeah, that whole chemistry, that's started in January, you know, when I first got here. There's great people on this team, like the two up here, and chemistry wasn't an issue tonight. We just need to continue to work on the details and not shoot ourselves in the foot.
Well, you know, he played well. You know, I think I had to watch the film. I thought he managed the game decent. You know, got to kind of figure out what happened on that last play. You know, I just don't know if he got kind of lost situationally. He showed a lot of moxie out there, and he's a great leader. He's a great leader, and he's got a calm out there, and that's contagious amongst a young offensive line that we played with today. You know, and he's definitely made it interesting. That's for sure.
Owls had 4 players out with injuries on Saturday, the most notable being quarterback Forrest Brock. Brock suffered a wrist contusion in the game against Navy. He is currently on a day-to-day status. Other players who are day-to-day and missed the Coastal Carolina game are Wisdom Qureshi, James Famanu, and Kevin Terry.
Now, Sam, I know that we talked about Forrest Brock not starting because of that wrist contusion that you just mentioned, but honestly, I don't think it matters. After what I saw week 1 or in the first game for Evan Simon, he should be the starting quarterback from here on out. I don't know how he wasn't the starter to start the season because the offense was just simply better. It was moving down the field. The first drive, he got them into field goal range, ended up not being converted on. But then the third drive gets them again into field goal range after a bad drive where he threw a pick 6. That really, I don't think it was necessarily all his fault. But still, at the end of the day, Evan Simon was moving the offense consistently too. Something that we never saw Forrest Brock do once within the 2 games that he started for Temple.
Yeah, Hayden, I mean, this offense was moving no matter if it was passing yards or rushing yards. Temple actually had 185 passing yards compared to Coastal Carolina, who they outpassed by 82 yards. It just goes to show that this offense had confidence this week. It was something we have never seen this season so far, and it's something that obviously needs to continue. Whatever had happened needs to keep happening, and if it's Evan Simon in at quarterback, then the Temple Owls just need to keep him there.
Yeah, they definitely need him there, but that's with to be said, too. There were some offensive struggles that we saw, too. Obviously, the pick 6 that Simon threw, which I don't think was his fault. Right? The ball gets batted in the air at the defensive line, so I'm not going to put all that blame on him, but also we saw E.J. Wilson fumble that gave Coastal Carolina the ball at the 11-yard line. That's 14 points that you just give up from basically the offensive end. That's half of what Coastal Carolina scored, too. So there's definitely some things that have to get brushed up on the offense, even with Evan Simon there, but it was definitely a much better look than what I saw prior.
No, you're completely right. The ball security, the eye discipline, that all needs to be brushed up. But also taking a look at the defensive side of the ball, they look great too. I mean, DJ Woodbury sacked Ethan Vasco. That's the first sack of the season for Coastal Carolina.
That's the first sack of DJ Woodbury's career too.
Yeah, he had 15 sacks, a career high for him in this game. It just goes to show that this Temple team moved in the right direction.
Yeah, they definitely picked it up, right? We talked about the run game and their rushing attack, how bad it was stopping other teams. They held Coastal Carolina, a team that was averaging 285 yards from the ground, to 184 yards, which was 100 yards less. I'm not a mathematician, but I know that that's 100 yards less than what they were giving up. That is solid from a team that was also up too, so they're running the football more. And for Temple to stop them defensively in the run game is definitely a positive light as well.
It's definitely something we have been wanting to see, something that we've been needing to see. Temple also improved on penalties, which is huge. They only had
up until the very last minute,
they
played 59 good minutes of good penalties.
0 in the first half, so there are some bright sides to this game, despite losing and dropping to 0-3 this season. But now we talked about the differences in the game that Evan Simon made for the Owls behind center. So let's stay on that topic. We now welcome in Inside the Nest beat reporter Jackson Bachelor, who was at the link on Saturday and saw this change firsthand. Hey, Jackson.
Yes, guys, with the Owls coming into Saturday's game with an 0-2 record and their starting quarterback Forrest Brock inactive, it was a fresh start for Evan Simon. Even though the Owls did not secure the victory, It was their best game, and Simon was a big part of it.
Temple returned home on Saturday with a new man behind center. Evan Simon got the start in place of an injured Forrest Brock in Game 3 against Coastal Carolina.
You never know. You're always one snap away. And Coach gave me the chance this week, and yeah.
With less than a week of preparation, Simon stepped in with mostly positive results. The junior threw for 185 yards and 2 scores. A nice game overall, but not strong enough to get Temple the win.
But Evan did a great job of prepping and getting himself ready to go. And, you know, it was not his first rodeo in terms of game experience. So we practiced that way from day one. You know, that Sunday we knew what time it was and tried to get him ready to go.
After scoring more points in this game than the first 2 games combined, there is optimism for the offense. But the turnovers and failed conversions continue to be an issue.
Unfortunately for the Owls, they're not only struggling to hold on to the ball, but they've also struggled to get the ball back.
For us in this offense, the way we're built, you know, our defense has got to find a way to get a takeaway here and there. You know, there's no doubt about it.
Despite the loss, the Owls showed flashes on both sides of the ball, and the team feels that they can find success regardless of which quarterback is under center. We might not know until Saturday exactly who will get the start versus Utah State.
If the Owls can limit the turnovers and string together some consistent drives, this offense has the chance to really get into rhythm, especially with back-to-back home games coming up. But we might not even know who's under center until it's game day. Reporting from Edward Golson Hall, I'm Jackson Bachelor. Hayden and Sam, back to you on desk.
Thanks, Jackson. For this week's play breakdown, Hayden and I both chose an offensive play from Temple.
Temple's offense looked a lot less stagnant with Evan Simon leading the charge. So let's take a look into how. So I'm going to set up my play. This is a 4th down and 6. And we see Evan Simon gets the ball to Dante Wright, and he just explodes. This was huge, too, for Temple. We're going to see it now. Pause it right here. We see there's 4 defenders around Dante Wright. He's just going to cut to his right side to get rid of them, and you can play it again. He's just going to explode. This was a gain of over 15 yards on a 4th down play with Temple down by 1 possession in the 4th quarter. So this was a critical play too. Dante Wright has been outstanding. And also look at the pressure that was drawn from Evan Simon to get that off. Temple has just looked really good offensively under Evan Simon.
Now we can play my play. You're going to take a good look at the top right of your screen. Evan Simon is going to pass this ball to John Adams. It's a 3rd and 6 situation that will cut Coastal Carolina's lead to just 11 points. Evan Simon did a great job of scouting out this play. We're going to see just in 1 second. He's going to scout it. He's going to run all the way to the right. Despite the defenders, he's going to pass it to John Adams, who just slides right into the end zone for the score. But now it is time to take our first break of the show. When we return, we will hear from head coach Stan Drayton, who spoke at his Monday news conference.
His talk will include an update on the QB situation within the Temple locker room. We'll be back in just 90 seconds. Stick around.
Welcome back to Inside the Nest. Coach Stan Drayton met with the media on Monday to discuss Temple's loss against Coastal Carolina and look ahead to Saturday's matchup against Utah State. Drayton spoke on the mindset of this team, injuries, and the current state in the quarterback room.
Immediately, we dealt with adversity early in that ball game, and you know, I thought our kids overcame that with some grit. You know, there was plenty of opportunities that we put ourselves into that gave us an opportunity to win that ball game. We established a run up front. You know, very encouraged with the quality of the depth that we have at O-line right now, being able to play three new guys. That did not play the previous games and came in there and did a very solid job of establishing the run, protecting the quarterback for the most part. Evan went in there and showed some grit and some real leadership, you know, pushed the ball down the field. You know, just some setbacks that we had to overcome on offense with the turnovers. It's still, you know, but again, as a team, I thought we showed some grit in overcoming that during the course of the game. The mindset was right. Some things that are still showing up that need to continue to be improved upon is just when we are not locked in and focused, in particular on defense and doing our job. It's not an effort issue. It is a focus issue. people have taken advantage of that. It was good to be home, hearing our own band and seeing the people in the stands. It was a really, really good turnout, and, hoping we can get that same turnout. It really played a difference in our motivation out there as we play for our fans. Yeah, well, he just doesn't flinch under pressure. That's the thing that you notice with Evan. I mean, he's been there before. There hasn't been a whole lot that he hasn't seen and hasn't experienced. So that piece of it, he's that calming force for the offense when things may be kind of going sideways, that he can reel them in and reset the whole mindset of that offense, and that's huge. He knew exactly the situation, just threw a bad ball. That's what he's claiming, and that's right. I mean, that out route was right at the sticks. If it was a better throw, it would have been a contested catch for sure. It would have been a 50-50, but we make that throw and that catch, we get the first down, and we keep the thing alive. So, we keep that competition alive. But right now with the status of Forrest Brock, Evan has to be ready to take over that position and get us in position to win ball games.
That was part one of Stan Drayton's weekly press conference. And Sam, one thing that I took away was that he talked about the adversity that they faced, right? They're down 21-3. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh boy, here we go again, right? Yeah. Another blowout loss. It's coming. It's going to be over in the first half. But it wasn't, right? They didn't let it unravel. They didn't let it get away from them. They had the ball in the fourth quarter, down by one possession. If you would have told me that at halftime going in, I would have said you're crazy. But they were able to stay focused towards the end, and I think it was a good sign to see that.
No, this team is definitely heading in the right direction. The results obviously aren't going to show it. It's not going to show it on their season record so far. But I thought it was interesting that Drayton said this is a focus thing. This is not a mindset thing, which is completely different than what he was saying last week when the Owls faced Navy, that the mindset of the players just wasn't there. This week, the mindset was there. The focus was just the thing that they were lacking. Yeah,
and talked about adversity, too. Just having three guys on the offensive line that were starting in previous weeks, they all go down. We find out at game time. And next thing you know, guys like Kevin Terry, who was walking to class Friday afternoon, sprains his ankle. So also to have a brand new offensive line, basically, with a brand new quarterback as well, it really showed that they were kind of able to just figure everything out towards the end.
I also think that Stan doesn't know who he wants in this quarterback position. He was kind of contradicting himself a little bit throughout his press conference, saying like, Forrest is our guy. If Forrest is healthy on Saturday, he's going to play.
Which I don't know. I don't think that should be the thing. I think Evan Simon should be the starting quarterback regardless of the status.
And then he says that Evan Simon leads this team.
Yeah.
So I do think it's interesting. But in part two of Drayton's presser, he touches on Temple's upcoming game against Utah State and what Temple needs to improve on before Saturday.
Well, I'll tell you, Utah State has had to overcome a bunch of adversity, right? They've got a lot of new things going on, and, they've got setbacks just like we have setbacks. But, the one thing I noticed is that they keep playing hard. They present some issues on their defense with the way they pressure. It seems like a whole lot. Utah, when they play at Utah, they heat Utah up pretty good. It took a minute for Utah to get going. So we do have to get prepared for their pressure package. But they have a really good linebacker, number one, who diagnoses, tackles. He's good in coverage. He's good against the run. He's a very good football player. Offensively, this quarterback, I know he's a backup quarterback, but he is an athletic joker, They run their offense very, very fast. This is probably the fastest tempo that we've seen since I've been here. You turn the film on and the chain crew is barely getting lined up before they're snapping the ball. That's going to present some issues if our eyes are not in the right place, the communication is not on point. We don't have a whole lot of time for dialogue, and that's going to be the challenge this week against Utah State. That's a great question. It's a lot of variables that go into losing focus. It can be, miscommunication. It can be, you're on the edge and you feel like the clock's against you and you got to find a way to win, and then you step outside your job description and do something that you're not supposed to do, trying to make a play. And we have very competitive football players. That's kind of been the common denominator, is they see things kind of not going their way. It's not like they're flinching, but they're trying to make a play. and sometimes they step outside their job description. Well, that's losing focus, and we've had a lot of examples that we should be learning from at this point, that when we do that, things don't necessarily go our way. It's not going according to plan that way. So, no, it's about staying true to your coaching, staying true to your job description. Fatigue will play into that from sometimes, but again, when you have a larger purpose, you can't let fatigue get in the way, so it's a mindset. It really is a mindset to stay focused. It's not an easy thing to do, but it is required if we're going to win football games here at Temple. Absolutely. It's to the point now, where if those guys do not buy into the way we're teaching them to carry the football, and things of that sort, then they won't play.
That was part 2 of Stan Drayton's weekly press conference. I think the thing that stuck out the most to me was the fact that Temple still needs to work on their eye discipline. They still need to work on this ball security. And all of these mistakes just seem like they're miscommunications. Yeah. I mean, Stan Drayton knows that these players that he is playing, they're the most disciplined. They're going to learn from the mistakes. They're not going to make the excuses. So when he's saying, I'm going to take a player out, he knows they don't have the mindset. Like I said, it goes back into last week, but it seems like everyone has kind of shaped up into what they need to be this week. Yeah, especially against this Utah State offense, because we know how fast they're going to want to move the football, even though we might not know who's going to be starting in the quarterback position, because Spencer Petras, their starter week 1, rolled his ankle, so it looks like it's going to be a game-time decision for Bryson Barnes, who has been backing up for them. They have, of course, lost the last 2 weeks, playing ranked teams, although within the conference. So it's a team where we look at them and it's like, okay, we don't know who's going to be the starting quarterback, as with Temple as well. So we have a game coming up where we don't know who's going to be starting for both sides on the ball under center. So it's definitely going to be an interesting factor to the game. But you mentioned the fact that Utah State has been playing these ranked teams. Yeah. Utah State kept up with Utah last week. Mm-hmm. And this is definitely going to be a tough challenge for Temple. Stan Drayton mentioned that he's very excited to have this opportunity. Temple just needs to get on the right path. I think they're at a great starting point with what happened against Coastal Carolina, but if you fix up the miscommunication, if you fix up the eye discipline, and you just focus, that's what they're lacking. Stan Drayton said it himself. They are lacking focus. They are not lacking effort. It will change this team drastically. Yeah, and especially just looking back at Utah State, right? They're playing tough teams against tough opponents, and this is a team that had a bunch of off-season controversy and dialogue with Blake Anderson getting fired, and then, of course, Nate Dreiling now taking over. He came in as the DC just this past season. Then in July, next thing you know, he's coaching the whole team. But when we come back, we're going to take a look on the other side and see how Utah State fared in the matchup with nationally ranked Utah. Don't go anywhere. Inside the Nest will be back shortly. Welcome back. Utah State is coming into Philadelphia with a 1-2 record. The Aggies have lost their 2 most recent games after that win in their season opener. Most recently, Utah State played 12th-ranked Utah in an overall competitive game. The Aggies took on nationally ranked Utes on Saturday. Utah State quarterback Bryson Barnes completes a short pass to Brock Lane, who runs up the middle for the first touchdown. Barnes yet again passes to Jack Hestera for a touchdown and gets the 14-3 lead. Utah's Isaac Wilson responds during the next drive with an 11-yard touchdown pass of his own to Money Parks. The Aggies are still in the Utes' way by 4 points. Get ready for it, Wilson is not done. Another touchdown, this time targeting tight end Kayla Levine. The Utes pushed their way ahead with the 17-14 score. Micah Bernard with a 3-yard rush into the end zone, and the Utes are definitely feeling it now. Isaac Wilson is in his groove. He throws his 3rd touchdown of the day to Carson Ryan for 2 yards. The Utah Utes take the 35-21 victory over the Utah State Aggies. Wilson threw for more than 200 yards and 3 touchdowns in replacing injured starting QB Cam Rising. Micah Bernard ran for over 100 yards in back-to-back games for the first time in his career. The senior also had the first touchdown of his season. Van Fillinger matched the career-high 8 tackles. The Utah transfer Bryson Barnes barely completed over 50% of his pass attempts,
Rashul Faison ran for 115 yards, averaging more than 6 yards per carry. Junior Otto Tia had a career day with 5 catches for 78 yards. Transfers Clyde Washington and Jordan Vincent led the way with 11 tackles each. Now it's time for our players to watch this week, and I'm going to look over on the other side at Utah State. I'm going to choose linebacker John Rice-May. He's a guy that is a vocal guy for them on the defensive end. He diagnoses a lot of their play calls. He's a very good tackler as well, especially in the open field, and he's just very good in the zone coverage too that we're going to see from Utah, especially against the run game, which is something that Temple offensively hasn't been able to do. If they can't do it again, John Rice-May might be one of those factors as to why.
Now looking at Temple's side, quarterback Evan Simon made a name for himself against Coastal Carolina. And if he starts again this week, it shouldn't be any different. Simon brought a spark to this entire team that we haven't seen yet. Of course, playing Coastal Carolina at home isn't the same as playing Oklahoma on the road. But Simon looked pretty good this past Saturday.
Now that we know who to focus on, it's time for Sam and me to give some advice on what Temple can do come Saturday. Just in case they ask. You never know.
It's time for routes to success. And it seems as if some of our routes were successful last week for the Owls. Route number 1, keep the offense moving. Temple did a good job getting down the field this week. The Owls racked up 314 total yards and got 14 first downs. Regardless of the end result, it is a huge improvement and something that Temple needs to continue doing as the season progresses.
Route number 2, they have to force turnovers. This is a team that has not gotten a single turnover this season. Defensively, Andreas Keaton said following the Coastal Carolina loss that it's going to happen. When we see it happen, I think that's when Temple's going to win their first game, when they win that turnover battle.
Route number 3, keep the energy up. This was a very different Temple team than we saw against Oklahoma and Navy. The Owls felt more alive and were able to hold Coastal Carolina, a team that previously averaged about 300 rushing yards per game, only to 184. The offense and defense need to keep this energy as they look ahead to this very important game.
Route number 4, the defense has to be prepared for this up-tempo offense, right? You watch the film on Utah State, you can barely see the chain gang getting set. It looks like they're almost struggling to get set to prepare. So the defense is going to have to be as well, and that comes with that communication and that eye discipline that we've heard Coach Drayton constantly talk about. That's going to have to be a focus, especially against this Utah State offense. It's time to get some insight from the other side. We spoke to Jason Walker from CV Daily. He's been covering the Aggies since 2016.
Jason took us through the quarterback situation and injuries at Utah State and the story behind the youngest head coach in the FBS.
The biggest strengths and weaknesses on the defensive side of things are for this team coming to face Temple?
There's still issues with the run defense, which is something that dates back to last season. I think the last 3 games of the year, Utah State allowed 300 plus rushing yards in each game. I think it was 1,000 yards rushing over the last 3 games combined. That was including the bowl game. So they couldn't stop a nosebleed. If I played running back against Utah State, I probably could have had a 100-yard game last year.
Hey, Coach Drayton made sure to point out John Ross-May. Can you just talk about him and a little bit about his game and anyone else on the defensive side that Temple should look out for?
Yeah, John Ross-May is a newcomer to the team this year. Came from Lenore-Rhine. Where I think he was Division II All-American. I forget the exact accolades, but the tackling machine there at Lenore-Rhine makes the jump up to Division I all the way to FBS, and he's been good. He's played that role with the Aggies, be the tackling machine. Probably one of the big guys to watch for is Ike Larson. He's kind of the hometown hero with the team. He grew up, went to one of the local high schools just a few miles away from Utah State. Now he plays that safety spot, and he's a dynamic player. He's a ball hawk. He'll create turnovers. He'll get tackles for losses kind of out of nowhere.
Who on that offensive side of the ball who is healthy, do you think Temple needs to watch out for? And then what are their strengths going into this?
Yeah, Rasul Faison. So if we're going to talk about guys that I'm pretty confident will play, it would start with Rasul Faison. This is a guy averaging, I think it's a little over 6 yards per carry. It's like 6.1, 6.2 yards per carry. The Aggies haven't gotten to run him very much. They've not been able to give him volume carries because they're coming off games where they lost 48-0 and 38-21. But to go over Jalen Rose in case he does play, I don't think it was a serious injury, and I think he'll play. To go over him, he's very fast. He's 6 foot, 195, so decent size, a lot of speed, and he's also just very good at going up and getting a ball. If it's a jump ball, he had a fantastic one-handed catch against Utah, where he just reeled it in with his left hand, tucked it in, and that was for like a 35-yard gain or something like that. Helped set up I think it was set up one of the scores for the Aggies.
Last week, everyone agreed that Temple would drop to 0-3 on the season with a loss to Coastal Carolina. This prediction has all of us at 3-0 on the year. Now it is time to look ahead for our crew to give our predictions for this week's matchup. I'm picking Utah State to win this week 23-18. Although the Owls had a better showing last week and are coming in with a chip on their shoulder, this is a Utah State team that has a very good passing game, no matter who their starting quarterback is. This has the makings to be a very close game, but Temple still has to put some work in before I can see them taking the win.
I've also got Utah State winning. I'm going to say 29-23. Although it's a team that has struggled against the run, Temple has not proven that they themselves can run the football well this season. Defensively also, when we look at Utah State, they're a little too fast for me to pick Temple. When we look at their offense, we've seen them unfocused in the past, and that is not a good recipe to success to have against this type of styled offense.
Guys, I'm going to have to agree. I'm going to go Utah State 26, Temple 23. After last week's performance, I think that the Owls will keep it another close game, but I just ultimately see them falling to 0-4. Utah State's coming off a game against the Utah Utes, the 12th-ranked team in the country, in which it was a one-score game all the way up until the fourth quarter. So I just think ultimately on Saturday, Utah State will be the better team.
Guys, I've also got Utah State 27, Temple 21. After the Owls' performance versus Coastal Carolina, I'm very hopeful that they can continue the momentum shift they sparked at home, but I do think this game might not fall in Temple's favor after Utah State was able to score 21 points on number 12 ranked Utah.
The four of us were all correct in picking against Temple last week, and so were 71% of those who jumped on our social handle to make your own pick. It's time to see where you see Saturday's game going. Jump on at Owl Sports Update on X and tell us who will win with Utah State in town. It's this week's Twitter poll, even though it's on X.
Temple versus Utah State will take place at Lincoln Financial Field on Saturday. Kickoff is at 2 p.m. and the game will be streamed on ESPN+. If you are unable to watch or get down to the link, we'll have live updates before, during, and after the game on our own social platforms at Owl Sports Update. It's about that time for us to take another break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Colin Schofield, the assistant editor for the Temple News.
Topic 1, Temple's QB situation. We'll see you on the other side of the break. Welcome back to Inside the Nest. We're joined by Colin Schofield, the assistant sports editor for the Temple News. Thanks for joining us on the desk, Colin.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So first thing we're going to talk about, obviously, is who do you want to see under center next week against Utah State?
Against Utah State, I think Evan Simon deserves a second chance to be under center. He looked, what Forrest Brock hadn't shown the first 2 weeks was confidence and comfortability under center. The first thing I noticed about Evan Simon was those two things. He was confident and he was comfortable in that offense and leading that offense. And it showed. They went down early, he snapped them right back into it, and they were right back in the game behind him. I think he deserves another shot to lead that offense against Utah State, but I think we don't know if Forrest Brock's going to be healthy or not. Stan said it's going to be a day-to-day situation.
Right.
That could mean he plays. That could mean it's 3 more weeks. So if Forrest is healthy, I think we see Forrest Brock play against Utah State, but there will be a shorter leash. Stan, I think he has said that Forrest Brock is his guy, and he didn't want to have that leash the first 2 games. After seeing what Evan Simon kind of showed against Coastal Carolina, if Forrest comes out and doesn't play well again, I think we see Evan Simon no matter what. But I think Evan Simon needs another chance to kind of build on what he showed last week.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he definitely showed that he deserves another spot. I think, honestly, regardless of whatever the status of Forrest Brock is, right? Because we saw him for 2 weeks, and he didn't really never got the offense going. He got one touchdown drive that was late in the game against Navy. Evan Simon was taking them down the field in the first quarter too, which is just something that we never saw this season.
I agree with both of you. I said it a few weeks ago. I said, I think we're going to need to see new quarterbacks coming into this competition, and we have. And although Stan says it's a competitive outfield right now, I think this job might be Evan Simon's, although Stan Drayton isn't ready to give it to him. For some reason, Forrest Brock knows the playbook better. But now moving on, do you think that this loss is more on the coaches than it is on the players?
I think it's tough to pin the loss against Coastal on either the coaches or players. I mean, they went out there after really not playing well against Oklahoma, which was expected, and then really, really not playing well against Navy, which wasn't supposed to happen. And then they go out, they bounce back against Coastal Carolina, go down big, but come back and almost win. There's discussions for both sides as to who is to blame, but I'm not going to put the blame on anyone because, yeah, it could be on the coaches. Stan Drayton had some poor clock management at the end of the first half with his timeouts and running the clock down. Probably could have tried to drive down and get another touchdown there or at least get a field goal. And then the players, there's 2 turnovers in there. There's miscues, Evan Simon's throw on the last play of the game that goes out of bounds. There's the argument made for it to be the players too, but they go out there, they play their best game of the season so far. I think it's tough to blame either side there. I think they really have to work on building off of what both sides really built there and keep trusting each other and building that focus and trust to get to that point to where they can win a game.
Now, when we look at the remaining 9 games left on the schedule, how realistic do you see Temple, how many games do you realistically see Temple pulling off a win at?
I think realistically I can see Temple pulling off ideally 3 to 4 wins. It's not an easy remaining schedule. I think they could very easily win on Saturday against Utah State. I think they can beat UConn in a couple weeks. I think they can beat FAU in a few weeks too. Those are kind of the 3 games that I look at and I'm like, okay, those are winnable games. With the talent this team has, I think they can go out and get those wins. With the rest of the schedule, those are tougher opponents that they'd really have to play some good football. They'd have to force some turnovers, make some really good plays to win those games. But Saturday, UConn, and Florida Atlantic, I think are winnable games for this team. I mean, it'd be a 3rd straight 3-9 season, but based off where we are right now, I think anyone would take 3 wins from this team.
Thank you so much for coming on, Colin. We really appreciate your time. But now we are up against our last break of the show.
When we come back, Inside the Nest beat reporter Kayla Levine will take us around the American. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. It was a weekend of non-conference play, but there were different AAC teams that had a hard weekend competing against nationally ranked teams. Let's take a look. Starting off with the AAC's marquee win of the weekend, South Florida beat Southern Miss 49-24 at home, securing their 2nd win of the season. Staying in the win column, FAU beat FIU 38-20, and the Charlotte 49ers came back in the 4th quarter, scoring 21 points to beat Gardner-Webb in a close ending 27-26. Memphis beat the Seminoles in a big upset win at Florida State, holding the Seminoles to just 12 points. The final score was 20-12 Memphis. Moving on to losses, UTCA, Tulane, and Tulsa all lost to national ranked teams, and the Roadrunners lost to number 1 ranked Texas 56-7. Tulane lost to 15th ranked Oklahoma in a closer game 34-19, and staying in Oklahoma, the Tulsa Golden Hurricane lost to 14th ranked Oklahoma State at home by the final score of 45-10. There were definitely more losses than wins this week, including both Army and Navy having a bye week. That's all I have for this weekend's AAC matchups. Reporting from the studio set, I'm Kayla Levine. Guys, back to you at the desk.
Thank you, Kayla, and thank you, everyone, for watching.
Have a great week.